Hey you guys, so I've got a game right now with a player rated in the 400 to 500 bracket, and it's a 20-minute rapid game, unrated. In fact, I think it was rated, so it would be a 16-0 for me. So what we're going to be looking at in this is what kind of mistakes do players make rated around that area, 400 to 500, okay? So if you are around that area, then there should be 2 or 3 key things to take away from this video that that you can carry on with you to improve your chess. So without further ado, let's make a start. Okay, so I'm playing with the white pieces, and I start with d4. d5, very typical response, perfectly good response. So with this first move, then both of us are potentially allowing our queen to move forward, so it's a queen to get off the back rank, which is normally what you want to be doing towards the end of your development. But before you do that, you want to get your minor pieces out into the board, and they are your bishops and your knights. Now, in order to get your bishops out into the board, you have to move 2 pawns, because at the start of the game, if I've just moved back, your dark squared bishop is blocked in by 2 dark squared pawns. So until one of those 2 pawns moves, that bishop cannot get off the back rank, cannot get into the middle of the board. Likewise, with the light squared bishop, the light squared bishop is blocked off by 2 light squared pawns on E and G. And until one of those moves, that light squared bishop cannot get into the game. So knights, on the other hand, can jump over pieces, so they can get in at any time, all right? You don't have to have a pawn move in order for a knight to get into the game. So, in order to complete development, bear in mind, you're going to have to move 2 pawns. So, we start with the d-pawns, and that allows one of the bishops on each side to get into the game, and potentially also the queens, okay? So, perfectly good start. So, on move 2, I develop my bishop. Now, this is something to remember. At some point, I'm likely to want to support this pawn. And the most natural way to do it would be bringing a knight out. So the knight out from the other side of the board. So if I've moved my queen's pawn to d4, then knight to f3 protects that pawn, okay? The other common way to defend that pawn would be to play e3 by pushing a pawn. Defending pawns makes a lot of sense. That gives you a structure, gives you solidity, and then allows your pieces to think about attacking rather than defending. Okay, so if I want to play e3, that makes perfect sense, because then I would have a nice pawn structure. Maybe I'll put my king behind here when I castle. But one of the downsides of e3 is that it could actually block in my dark squared bishop, this guy. So the reason why I've moved my dark squared bishop out into the board first is so that I can then push e3, get that nice pawn structure, and I haven't blocked in. I haven't bricked this dark squared bishop in. There's no point moving d4 and then promptly playing my e3. Yes, it's a known opening, right? But it does make life difficult potentially later on. So that's the reason for that move. Now, black pushes f6. Now, Grandmaster Ben Feingold, I've said this before and I'll keep saying it, says that F for the F pawn stands for forget about it. Right? This is the forget about it pawn. You do not want to be moving the F pawn unless you have a very positive reason to do it, or you're absolutely forced to do it. And the reason is because it has opened up a diagonal pointing towards the black king. So let's say I play e3, and then let's say black puts his bishop there. Seems perfectly sensible, right? You know, but then my queen could come in with check, and that bishop's going to have to be forced to move there, otherwise I'll simply capture it. Yeah? And of course, if, let's say, h6 was played and the bishop was on there, and then I bring my queen out after playing e3, then the bishop will be lost, because black would have no way Oh, in fact, no, he can push. There you go, g6. That would be all right. But in general, you don't want to be opening up that diagonal towards your king unless you've got a very, very good reason to do so. So don't move the forget about it pawn this early on in the game. So now I push e3. Okay, so now I've got a nice structure, and I could proceed to build what we call the London system. If I also push c3 and bring my bishop out, and then my knights potentially can come to here. That's a London system. Very good, solid opening. It's played at the top levels, and it's very, very good for beginners as well. Now this is, I think, a reasonable looking move. So black now plays e5. But what black has now done is moved his pawn into a position where it is attacked twice. Okay? So there you go, 2 red lines for red arrows for attackers. Okay? So, and it's in a position where it's defended only once. And this is basic tactics, right? Counting attackers and defenders. People do make this mistake at higher levels as well. So I can capture the pawn. So now I'm up 1 pawn. And it's a nice central pawn as well. So now black's e-pawn has disappeared, off the board, gone forever. Okay, now let's say if black wanted to recapture with the f-pawn, then my bishop can recapture as well. So I'm still up a pawn. So now black plays bishop to b4 with check. And again, this has a merit, but on balance, it's not good. And the reason is because I now get to play c3. And in playing c3, I'm doing a few things. The first thing is I'm attacking the bishop. Okay, so now the bishop is going to have to move. And what that means is that on this move, black is having to spend his turn moving his bishop to safety, and therefore doesn't get to develop any of his other pieces or get his king safe or anything like that. This king is starting to look a little bit vulnerable. Okay, so don't do a pointless attack. Don't do a pointless check, especially when your opponent can move a pawn and force you to move away. Okay, and this pawn move is not bad for me. This pawn move would allow my queen out into the board. So my queen now has 2 nice diagonals, both of which are pointing at that king. One of the reasons is because this f-pawn has moved when it didn't need to move, right? So, yeah, not a good move. So now black has to move the bishop one more time, and now black moves it to a square that is attacked. Okay, so this is what we call a blunder. It's a basic error that simply loses material, simply loses you some kind of advantage in the game. Okay, so let's look. So the bishop was here. The bishop has the following squares, right? That's safe, that's safe, that's safe, and that's safe, right? This one is not, and this one is not. Okay, and that's what you have to do. This guy's got 19 minutes, 25 seconds on the clock in a 20-minute game. Okay, so one of the most fundamental things, just principles about playing online chess is think about the time control that you're playing. So this guy is playing a 20-minute game as though it's a 3-minute blitz game, right? You don't do that. You generally think about using roughly a third of your time in the opening, a third in the middle game, and a third in the ending, right? Now, he's playing his moves far too quickly. Okay, it isn't above his level of experience or skill to identify which squares he can move to, and of those squares which are attacked. Right, so he can move to any of these 4 blue squares, but he can't move to these 2 because they are both covered by. No, I don't want to. There we go. We'll do a. Going to do a red arrow. Yeah. These 2 are both, and this one that he's on now, these squares are covered by pawns. So he can't remain on there without being captured, and he can't move there or there. So take your time. Say, okay, out and use it. If you're playing online, you can right click, right, on squares. And and say, okay, well, I can't move there because of the pawn, and I can't stay there, and I can't move there. Not there, there, right? And then you go, okay, well, out of the ones that I can move to, which looks best, right? And you can do that at 400. What you can't do is simply move your bishop onto a square where it can be captured straight away, okay? So, now I proceed with my development. I'm going to want to castle my king on this side of the board, so in order to do that, I have to get rid of the 2 pieces that are in the way. Black now develops a bishop, which is a reasonable move. However, of course, this pawn is hanging, so hanging just means it's en prise, which means it can be captured and it's not protected. Now, this is reasonable. The knight comes out. This is doing a couple of things, because with that capture, my queen is also now attacking this bishop. Okay, so this is a very decent move. Bringing the knight out, attacks the queen, right? And also defends the bishop. So a good multi-purpose move there from black. However, my queen is also, this was a fork, right? My queen is attacking both the bishop and the b7 pawn. So this is also a very reasonable move. The knight now comes out, where it is protected by its buddy here. They are both now defending each other. And also, it's moving out of the way means that the queen is now protecting the rook with a discovered defense. Okay, however, because black has lost time and wasted time in the opening and made loose moves, I now, playing white, because I've got my pieces into the board in good positions where they're all defended and and partnering with each other, I have lots and lots of options. So I'm able to bring my bishop out, which is pinning the knight now. So this knight now cannot move, cannot legally move, because if it were to move, then the king would be in check from the bishop, and that would be illegal. So this knight legally cannot move anywhere. And what's more, I've now got 2 attackers on the knight. The bishop and the queen are both attacking the knight, and it's only got the 1 defender in the form of its buddy. So what does black do? Decides to attack the queen. And again, this seems like, oh, that makes sense. However, my next move comes with check, and that's a forcing move. If you can play a move with check, bishop takes the knight on c6, okay? The king is now in check, whoop, right? So the king is now in check, and that's dangerous. So the king has to either get out of check by capturing the bishop, by putting a piece in between, interposing, or by running away, okay? So in this instance, the knight captures the bishop, and now the queen captures the knight. So the queen gets out of trouble, where it was in trouble there, and also with check again. Queen now interposes, queen takes queen, and king takes queen. So black is now in a situation where he's down 2 knights, okay? And look at his pawn structure, very, very bad, okay? And all of this comes back to the choice of moves at the start of the game. Black has used less than 3 minutes of his clock in a 20-minute game, and he's already put himself in a losing position. So now b3 is played because this rook here was looking at the b2 pawn that was undefended. So I simply move that forwards. And now this is another blunder. The rook captures a pawn that is defended. So I capture the pawn. Sorry, I capture the rook. Now bishop takes knight. This is a bad move because black only has 2 pieces left, apart from his king, to help him try and win the game. Okay, I have 5 pieces on the board. And in making this exchange, black has gone from 2 against 5 to 1 against 4. And that's a big, big difference, right? With 2 pieces, you can potentially checkmate your opponent's king. With a king and a rook, it's going to be a lot harder, all right? So not a good idea. Rook attacks pawn. pawn pushes into a position which is defended by the b pawn, and now this pawn advances to attack the c pawn. And I get that, that's understandable. But white now has a move that prevents this pawn from capturing that pawn. Okay, and it's another pin. Remember earlier on the knight was pinned and it couldn't move because it would have put the king in check. Well, now we can do a pin with the rook. So rook to d1, and now this pawn cannot take there because it would leave the king in check, and that's illegal. So the king moves out of the way. But now I have knight to d4. Another forcing move comes with check, and the king can't stay there, can't go there, can't go there, can't go there. So the king is going to have to retreat, okay, away from the defense of this pawn. Another option I would have had as well is pawn takes d5, also with check. Okay, so I play there, the king has to retreat, I can capture the pawn. Rook comes down. Notice this pawn is defended by my knight. Okay, so I don't have to worry about that pawn, so I go ahead and castle. Rook takes pawn, bam, bam. Pawn is defended by the knight. Knight takes rook, and that's pretty much the end of the game. Pawn pushes where it's still defended twice, defended by both of these pieces. And now it's pretty much losing for black. Black plays one more move, but then decides that the game is completely lost and resigns the game. So a few very, very basic tips there for you if you're rated around the 400 to 500 mark. Simply not putting your pieces on squares that are attacked and controlled by your opponent, and just throwing away material for no reason at all. And I've given you a lot of other tips in the opening, and we've looked at some basic tactics like pins as well, and also forks. So I mean that's all chess is about, really. It's about those tactics, and the tactics get slightly more sophisticated as you get up to 500, 600, 700, 800, and that's all it's about. So it's about developing your ability to spot the threats, and it's about, but particularly 400 to 500, around there, it's about just trying to cut out those completely unforced blunders, giving away material, giving away the advantage to your opponent. So if you're around that level, I hope you've taken some tips from this. Keep watching, keep supporting. Let me know in the comments if this is helpful for you, because I love making this material. I really, really want to help players to improve and to get all the way up to 1,000 and beyond. If you're on chess.com, about half of the players on chess.com are rated under 1,000, half are rated over 1,000. So if you can get over 1,000, 1,050, then you will be in the top half, the better, stronger half of players on there, and I'm really, really happy to help you do that. So yeah, hope it's been helpful. I'll see you soon.